They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. What a beautiful time we've got ahead of us tonight on Rogue Ways as we get to understand from a wise and practiced master with what the phrase "as above, so below" truly means on a personal level, and see how we can bring further healing into the world if we can grasp some of the stuff physicists, mathematicians, cosmologists, and geometricians grapple with and apply it to our bodies while understanding of ourselves not just as matter, but as frequency and motion as well. Our guest has developed entirely new methods of treating our bodies from an Eastern and Western integration and from many disciplines, and I can't wait for her to lay the mystery open before us. Meredith Sands Keator, what an honor to have you here on Rogue Ways, and thank you for sharing your time with us tonight.
Wow. Thanks.
You're welcome. You deserve all that and more.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
It's really great to have you. I'm very excited about this chat, and I just want to remind people really quickly that 4 days from now is the One Day of Brightness event, so if you still haven't grabbed your tickets yet, we're going to be uplifted and enlightened and bring in the flourishing of the spring equinox, and it's going to be an awesome retreat. It's virtual, it's via Zoom. If you can't make the whole thing, it's recorded, so you can catch some afterwards, so go grab your tickets today. 4 days left for you to do that, and also jump over to Rockfin to follow me there. It's not only a really good backup to YouTube in case they decide I should not be heard by the public as well as my guests, but also there is a whole other show there, Middle Path, on Thursdays, and I would love to see you guys there. But Meredith, I always start with a pointless question of that episode, and I was going to ask you what your perfect weather, climate, and or geography would be for you and why.
It's funny that you asked that because I'm having to move from one place that I've been for many, many years to another place that I've never really experienced. And I've been asking myself that question for a while. So I grew up in a lot of snow and I always hate it. And so I've always, I've been living in sunny Southern California for a really long time as a result. And now I'm experiencing the possibility of spending a little bit more winter, but not quite so much, and how I'm going to feel without the ocean. But as long as there are hot springs nearby, I feel pretty much at home. And as long as there is something close to nature and less traffic and less congestion, that's really the best spot, I think, as long as we can still touch nature and feel it.
I am in agreement with you. Yeah, there's a lot of places that I feel more or less comfortable, but as long as there's somewhere where I can go and be immersed in nature and feel, especially with water, like hot springs, that's cool. But rivers, lakes, whatever it is, if I have that, I think I can be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you said you grew up in the snow. I would love to hear about your early life and how that sort of played into where you've gone.
Oh, well, I grew up in Canada, in Toronto, and I grew up with a mother who was very well known as a dancer with the National Ballet of Canada. And at the point that she got pregnant with me, actually, she had to stop her dance career. And so she spent a lot of time researching and following stuff in her body. So dance was always something she wanted to do. And she also found that there were limitations in her body that stopped her from dancing the way she wanted to. So while she was pregnant with me, she spent 3 and 4 hours a day on the floor, stretching and exploring her body and making it work in ways that satisfied her more. And in that way, actually developed a whole technique. So my grandfather, he was from Finland, and he always stretched. It was just kind of something that is in the family blood, I guess. And so my mother was really using that path. And he was a massage therapist as well, but really like a masseur, as they called them back in the day, and quite a healer. Even though I don't like using that term because I think we're all healers. If you have a body, you are the best healer that you know, is kind of my line. But so she kind of took that stretching and that whole body work awareness into her own body and then when I was 8 years old, she was actually called back to do the 25th anniversary of the National Ballet of Canada. And she was 45 and she hadn't stepped on stage for 13 years. And she conditioned her body in 2 rigorous months on top of all the stretching she'd been doing every day, all the time. And she danced a role that of Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, which was a really big deal. It was the largest theater house in Toronto, and I was 8. And I just thought my mom was like going to dance class, and she made a wicked tuna fish sandwich. I had no idea like what she was actually doing.
Yeah.
And then we went to go see the show. Let's go see Mom's show. And there she was, like getting thrown up over Romeo's shoulders and receiving a huge 20-minute standing ovation. And I just remember jumping up. I mean, I get real emotional still talking about it, because it all finished, and she got this standing ovation, and she's standing there with flowers in her hands, and everybody like immediately just stood up and started yelling bravo and clapping. And I was just clapping and looking around with tears just streaming down my face, because I was so overwhelmed by what I just witnessed and by the kind of response. So it's interesting that you asked that question, because that's actually, I've been raised in a kind of bodywork alternative. It's weird that it's called alternative, but that kind of, health style, and then paid no attention and was much more of a wild child, and wandered around trying to find out what it was that I was about and what I did. And then found out that I was exactly cut from the same cloth, and began the journey.
Wow. I love that it's, ancestral for you, that this is like coming down literally through your blood and part of your culture as well. And, your early formative experiences. But I just always love to ask, because, people come from such interesting places, and to see like the influences. And a lot of times I feel like people who are in this sort of alternative realm, I'm like you, I don't understand why it's called alternative. It's just thoughtful and present. But why, sorry, a lot of them come from like trouble, like troubled early times, and that's why they sort of looked differently at the system. But then there's some like you who come from just people who also looked differently, and so you just had that around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting too that you mentioned that, because we'll eventually get into the discussion about geometry and frequency and what my work is about. But I might not go into it now, but we can discuss it more later. But there's something called Hisalay, and there are things that the Finnish have always made. I think it's mostly the Finns, where they make these geometric shape out of rye stalk, and I actually have one up on my desktop now, but they hang over the table at Christmas time and stuff, or holiday season, and Himalaya are just something that are just around all the time, and they actually make these geometric shapes. And I didn't know that, and then a friend of mine from Finland, when she met me, she saw the work that I was trying to put together something that I could see in the body, and I was using these really, really thin bamboo sticks, and I was putting them all together in these triangular shapes and kind of building out. And then she sent me this book on Himalay, and this woman Ayakoski, who's amazing. She's like the world-renowned Himalist. And she said, look what your ancestors have always been doing. So the fact that it actually came down through some bloodline I don't even understand, and I was literally seeing and working with the same thing, and it explains to me why they made the Himalay, because I don't really know the history of it. But what they were doing was they were charting and mapping out the invisible, which is really what geometry does for us.
Wow. What an amazing.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah. And that those things are just percolating around in your blood. There's something to this ancestral memory, and that things really do get carried down. Like, it's just really amazing. So Himalay, do you make Himalay then? Did you start with that, or you just saw it around?
Well, they're pretty complex to make, but people can look them up. It's Himmel, maybe LLI, or it's one L, I can't remember. And then this woman Ayakoski, Koski, she grows all the rye in Finland. We become really good Facebook friends and email friends. She sent me her book, and I sent her my geometry of the body. And she grows all the rye and then hangs it, dries it, and it's got to be perfectly straight. I mean, this is like an art. It's a complete art. And then you take string and needle and you string all these geometries together and then hang them. So working with geometry really makes both the left and the right sides of your brain work together. It's a really fascinating mathematical science that uses both sides of the brain in a particular way that really opens up, our subconscious to our conscious mind, or our dream world to our this world. And so I really want to go to Finland and actually do a vlog with her and do a whole piece and take her workshop and really spend some time there with her and learn it as a craft and do a little kind of documentary on her. So I don't make them currently, but one day I might.
How cool. And that experience, like you're saying, of actually doing it physically, I'm sure like gives you this, that you just absorb some sort of understanding that you wouldn't otherwise do.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
obviously very well learned in the geometrical anyway. So it'll be.
And I failed math in high school.
Ha!
Like really, really young. It's the only thing I failed in high school. And so I say that because I think it's really like I was never a geometry person. But through the years, certain things happened that kind of made me become that. And now I'm pretty fluent in the language. And I'm explaining that to help explain what it is that I see in the body and how we can amplify our own internal connections really by tapping into our inner wisdom that much more.
Yeah. So school I think fails almost everybody. So what what led you? What are the things that led you to eventually start getting into these modalities? And I know you started with like acupuncture and those types of things, right?
Yeah, so I went
arts.
from I started doing shiatsu in the early 90s. I went to a really extensive program that actually sadly no longer exists, but it was the most extensive school outside of Japan, the Shiatsu School of Canada. And it was a 2-year full-time program. So we did a lot of Eastern diagnostics, and then I went on to study acupuncture. And so that was in the 90s. And then I was an acupuncturist for a while, but when I moved to the States, they didn't accept any of my training from the get-go. So I was already well on the path of my own work. So that was okay. But what I really needed out of it was not so much the modality, although the LAC at the end of my name would have been nice. But aside from that, really what I needed was the knowledge to be able to, you don't need needles to work with your body. There's a beauty to understanding Chinese medicine, meridians, and how they fit in with our Western physiology and what are nadis and what are dantians and like all of these different Eastern systems that seemingly are nothing like or connected to our Western counterpart. And so I actually, truth be told, once I just in between that and acupuncture school, I had a really powerful experience, a very out of the box experience that felt like 5 million volts ripping up my spine. And I went well off the deep end for a good month, nonstop, 24/7, and was very scared that I had completely lost my mind.
Wow.
And it was terrifying. And that's the short version. And at the end of that month, I was really like, I baffled, I had no idea how I could go from this to kind of like flipping over to the other side. And my whole body was filled with sensations and lights, and, I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And it was very overwhelming because I didn't have anything in my belief system that would explain that could happen. And so because nobody in the world told me that could happen, now we understand things like, well, we don't understand them, but at least we have words like Kundalini awakenings or different things like that, or spiritual awakenings. And they mirror madness very much so in a lot of ways, right? So I dove over to that other side, and then I got pulled back, and I don't know what dove me over and what pulled me back, but it didn't really feel like it had anything to do with me. And that I could control. And so in that whole space of time, I started like really feeling and sensing things in the body that were just kind of illustrating to me my nervous system. My nervous system got very, very sensitive. And because nobody in this world had really told me that something like that could happen, and it was a very hard thing to translate to anyone around me, so I just didn't. It brought into question anything I was ever taught here. It was a whole psychological dissolving at the same time. So I was a mess. And then after a month, I had an intensely beautiful, blissful experience. And then felt the next day like I was kind of dropped by the side of the road, and I was having to piece myself together, because I think my adrenals really got burned out because the fear was so extreme. If I had understood that this is a biological happening that happens to people, in one form or another. There's no one root to it, but it's actually a naturally occurring thing. It's just not commonplace, but it's becoming more common, that would have helped ease I would have at least felt like, okay, maybe there's some sort of method to this madness, but it really was incredibly destabilizing for me. And I didn't really know anyone at the time. Now that was important for me in retrospect,
Mhm.
because then what it did was it made me hell-bent on trying to understand what had happened to me. So I spent a long time still having some pretty strange experiences, but really piecing together what I was feeling in the nervous system. And all of the learning that I had had, I was experiencing different things in the body that really I wasn't being taught in school, and I wasn't reading in books. And I was like, what is going on? And I was totally obsessed. It's been 25 years of work of a really deep healing experience that I needed in order to understand what I was feeling, what I was seeing. And that ended up becoming an understanding of fractal anatomy, as I call it, which you can now Google, and a lot of medical stuff comes up because the body is fractal. But at the time, when the body showed me the concept of fractal, and then the next day an article dropped into my lap and gave me the word and the understanding, and I was like, oh, that's what I just saw in the body. Those kinds of experiences coming up. The whole kind of fractal nature of the body, and that geometry is just a way for us to witness the invisible in action. It's just being able to see frequency in the body. And so that's how it started.
Wow. That's so profound. So you still to this day have no indication of what started or what ended that period of time.
The only thing that I can say, I know that there's a story that my grandfather had some sort of similar experience. My mother doesn't know what it was, but it was like the kids just weren't allowed to go near him, and nobody talked about it. And I don't really remember. My mom doesn't remember very much, but it sounds to me. And my grandfather was a very deeply profound person. We didn't talk a lot because he didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Finnish, and I was only 9 when he died. Although I will say that when I was 11, I saw him 2 years after he died. He walked, we used his house as a cottage out in the country after he had died. And I was 11, and the whole house was asleep, and I just for some reason couldn't sleep. And he walked into my room clear as day.
Wow.
Typical ghost story kind of thing, where you can like see the closet. I could see the closet through him, but he was so very clear. And he turned around and looked at me, and I was like, ah, and I pulled the covers over my head,
Yeah,
which was
scary.
when I was a little kid, scared of the dark. Never pull the covers over your head.
Yeah.
Because then the scary thing will be right there when you pull the covers back down.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there with the covers over my head, and I was like, this is really dumb. This is my grandfather. What's he going to do? And so I pulled the covers back down, and he was gone, But sorry, what was your question?
What was the question? Oh, that you had no idea exactly what started it or ended it, but that your grandfather had maybe this similar type of occurrence.
Yeah. And I think we actually descend from the Sami, from people up in the northern Arctic circle of, the Finns and the Swedes and that whole thing. And
that's so interesting.
Not just sorry, go ahead.
Oh, my family may also, we are not sure, but we have a lot of the blood markers that would be concurrent and
Sami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Nice to meet you, sister.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, this is also then, because what you're describing from what we can tell at least, and maybe you want to share more, but it sounds like very similar to sort of the idea of initiation, into, in that almost like the shamanic tradition, and that you clearly are like the wounded healer. Like you had to go through, like you said, working, to figure out exactly what was happening and learning from this. And now you're sharing it with everyone else, which is kind of the path.
And a great relief that I know it might sound like overly dramatic, but I just feel so grateful. Like my work has just come out on the Resonance Science Foundation, Nissim Hiraman's platform. And and I'm just getting, there's a lot, I'm able to finally exhale and share, because this has been a very, very isolating, solitary journey for a lot of years. So I just feel actually really grateful that I've lived to the point that I got to feel an exhalation. Now I'd like to live long enough to be able to really share it and really get into workshops and keep teaching. I work with this technique my mother created called Somatic Stretch. So I teach people how to work with their own bodies, and people who work on bodies, how to amplify treatment results. And being in a workshop room with people and really geeking out about all this stuff is what really gives me joy.
Yeah, because you get to spread that then to those people, and then they get to spread it to whoever else, and then who knows how far this goes and how many people it helps,
Yeah.
like you said, they're really healing themselves, but you're giving them like the keys to that, which the keys were handed to you.
Well, yeah, and keys to their own body. It's really because it's our bodies that teach us the most. Those really are the best teachers.
Wow. So, your that experience again too, like you said, was very terrifying, and you had to go through it, and now you've like worked, to come back to this point, but you found then that you kind of understand that, and that you have a way to put it in a framework. Is there any part of your teaching that people are finding that same sort of relief, like, oh, that this type of thing has happened to you too, where you can help them with that as well, or is it sort of separate?
Do you mean people who've had out of the box weird experiences
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
I think that anytime there's the Emerging Sciences Foundation too. They do a lot of interviews and work around Kundalini, and there's the Kundalini Research Network up in Canada. I think that it's comforting to know that out of the box experiences happen, because so I think that when we hear that somebody's had a weird experience, it's helpful. But one thing that really does happen, which I think is important, is that people, there's another side to it. If you're telling a story of something that's happened to you that's out of the box, people are always looking, like if you start telling me a story about something that happened to you, my mind is looking for the file that can say, Lindsay's experience goes really nicely right in this file.
Yeah.
And now I understand Lindsay and I can move on with this conversation. But if I can't find a file, I start to question Lindsay, and I'm like, well, I don't know. What are you really kind of all about? And either like I'm going to just find a file because, okay, I think you fit into this one. And now I feel better about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just whatever, just something, well, or even just, the schizophrenic file comes in like, okay, I think you've lost it. We're going to put you in that file. Or you're just a drama queen and you lie, and I'm going to put you in this file. So it's actually really hard to talk about experiences that are out of the box, because we never know how they're going to be received. And I didn't talk about it until really about 5 years ago. And now I'm out of the box about it, because I don't really care if anybody believes me or doesn't believe me. This shit happens. And it's really ungrounding, and we are evolving on levels and accelerating on neurological levels that we don't understand. And so I think that it's very helpful on one hand, knowing I know that it would have helped me a lot if I had known that other people had gone through something similar.
Without being chucked away.
Yeah. There's a lot more information out there now, and especially with the internet and everything, and different kinds of experiences.
And did you have anything during that time with people that kind of understood or were helping, or was it just isolating and horrifying?
I think if I said that there wasn't any help there, I would offend some people, but the bottom line is that it was just really isolating. I did have a really hard time trying to express what it was. Sometimes people would assume that they knew what I meant, or I assumed that they didn't understand what I meant. I could not, it was because the sensory experience was so extreme that I didn't, it was like, yeah, I know it feels like this, but really I mean this, and I didn't know how to, I just felt unsafe. I felt unsafe. And my mother was definitely a big help. I ran to my mother like a child, I would
too.
Yeah. And even in that, I had voices in my head. It was full on. It was really scary. And so I did certainly, there were some people that definitely made me feel like I could try to talk to them about it, or if I was really badly off, that they would help me. But there were also times where I was afraid of myself. That's terrifying, and then the bliss experience was just like the complete 180 from all of that. And it was off the chart. And so so I just and then after that, there were different kinds of experiences that were happening. I ran away, basically. I ran back to my old career. And I just, and that involved travel and different things. And I just was like, la, 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 that never happened. And I still had some weird experiences, but I was grounding more and more. And eventually because really what happens, I think, is that there's some kind of cosmic drop we're given in our nervous system to run everything. And sometimes that aperture kind of opens and we get a flood of it. You know, some people are just born with a flood of it, and other people like get whacked with a flood of it. And so it really kind of puts a huge amount of voltage through a system that's only used to carrying a certain amount. And that really scrambles the brain when the brain is trying very hard to hold on to this reality, when you have to really push the boundaries and also not lose yourself in what new reality is making sense to you. So this process takes time. And the most important thing is to have an understanding that it's okay if you're confused, not to try to figure anything out when you're confused, to find places where you feel safe and to know that you are safe and that ultimately we did not put ourselves here and we do not take ourselves away. And there is a new level of faith that is nameless that for me really began to arise. And I think that that's what I would say to anybody going through it. You can trust more than you realize, and don't do anything that will harm yourself or anyone else. And that is the only law.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's the type of thing I think people who go through all kinds of like, little sprinkles of this or splatters or like the flood, like you're describing, just need to hear what you exactly said. So thank you for sharing that.
Right.
And so how did then this lead to the understandings that you developed? Obviously, you were talking about how you literally were seeing it and feeling it and, but then you ran away. So how did you come back to starting to like reintegrate that, I guess?
Because the gods made my life so difficult while I was overseas doing all the other stuff that I used to do, that they were, it was like I think they were just kind of like, thank God she's going home now, because otherwise she's going to get hurt, so
they're like,
so
oh,
I
you
went
think
back.
you can run away? Well, we'll show you.
That's right. We'll give you a little bit of a reprieve and you can make some money, but after that, so yeah, I went back to Toronto and I started my shiatsu practice full on, and really built a business in shiatsu and in acupuncture. And during a lot of that time, I mean, it really was a good 15-year process of me just tracking, reading everything that I could find to try to understand what was I sensing. And I knew a lot of the Eastern and the Western stuff as we learn it in this culture. But there were things in between that just weren't a part of that. So I wish I'd written everything down, but I didn't. But I was tracking what was going on and very obsessed on reading everything that I could get my hands on and working on bodies all the time and living in my own body. And eventually what started to happen was points of call, maybe in the body, inside what I call now organ level awareness, started to become very apparent. And really where tensions begin in the body are deep inside. And just like fabric, I mean, really the easiest way to sum up everything that I've learned is that our bodies are fabric. They are like a thickly woven web of complete mastery. And you cannot pull on any part of the spider's web without affecting all other parts of the spider's web. But where the center core gets pulled is deep inside. And there are certain areas to it, and it actually creates a pretty logical geometry in that. And that helps us give an idea. So for instance, in the center of your chest or to the side of your chest, there's a real pull that when it pulls in, it's going to pull down on the shoulder. That's where you get the neck pain, the shoulder pain, the between your shoulder blade irritation, even the side of your arm, your pectoral pain, but it's actually inside. But we think of these things as separate.
Yeah.
And not. And so in understanding the geometry, we're understanding the internal connection that's actually pulling like fabric on all these different areas.
Wow.
So if you're working with a frozen shoulder, for instance, or, a neck pain or any kind of bursitis or whatever it is, if you understand really where the core and the pull is coming from, then it's a lot easier for you to be able to do something about it and change it. So, that's where the Somatic Stretch, which is the work that I was raised in, and that my mother and I created a whole training program on it about 8 years ago. So I also run that. People who either want to work with their own bodies or people who want to train to teach in Somatic Stretch. So I bring people into their own bodies to help really release aches and pains and understand their own interior and create a deeper relationship with their body by working really gently this way. And then neural resonance therapy is what I call being able to work with the understanding of this geometric connection when you're working on bodies as a therapist.
The neural resonance. Well, about the that internal core that's being stressed in some way that, can lead to all those things. When you're describing that, I can like feel it, in my body. And I actually have really severe double major scoliosis, and I've had this surgery for it, and it's like the worst thing ever. But I was trying to explain way back when, before I got the surgery, my doctors are like poking and prodding me, taking these x-rays, and I was telling them like, well, my arm goes like this, and I like put too much energy there, and I sleep like this. And I think I had this like wisdom about it, but they were like, okay, take a pill. Like, why are you even telling us this? And I feel like that was maybe somewhat connected to that, like that we have this sort of awareness at some level, but it's like trained out of us, or it's, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're actually taught to think in lines and boxes so much that it's actually really hard for us to do that. I was having a conversation with my niece the other night on the phone, and I said, please write this down so I can write a blog about it, because she was talking about, the kind of the frustration. I said, like, why is it? I wonder why people get frustrated when you say like, well, maybe this part is connected to this part, and that's why this happens. And sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to hear that. I just want it to be. And she was saying, well, because for me, it's sort of like, I wish I could remember the string of thoughts that she went through, but it was like, well, then I realized, okay, well, if my neck pain's connected to my shoulder, and my shoulder is actually connected to my stomach because it's on the left-hand side, then that means I have to clean up my diet. And I'm not even sleeping well anyway, and I'm drinking too much coffee. So that's going to be, shooting my adrenals out. So I have to deal with that. And then figure out my sleep in relation to my digestion, just to fix my shoulder so that my neck feels better. And it just gets really overwhelming.
Yes.
And I said, oh, okay, I get that point. And then she said, but on the other side, the thing is that realizing that I can use my digestion is calling out for help. And that if I work with that, then the rest of my body and my neck and my shoulder feels better. Like that really gives me a sense of empowerment. Like I know how to work with my own body. And I was like, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's really the part of our culture, I think, that is maybe our biggest downfall, is that we have been trained into giving away all our responsibility, and like, it's infantilizing, and we're like, take care of us, tell us what to do, but also let me like do all these things I know are pretty bad for me, but like feel good in the moment, I guess, even though a lot of them actually don't when you get down to it, if you're very present in it. But it is, exactly that. We would have to change all of these things, and lots of people don't want to do any of that. But like you said, when you realize how much you can control and heal yourself, it is so empowering.
And it's little steps too. It's not having to change everything. I mean, I have a really bad history with substance abuse and different kinds of things. I mean, I think a lot of us grow up learning that alcohol and drugs are the way to actually connect with the world.
Yeah.
And that, to me, my father died when I was 17. That seemed to be like the best route for me. It was just like get social and get drunk and, and dive in deep. So, to me, it's a journey and process of healing. I mean, working on our respective edges, and just that you give the body just a little bit and it will go a mile for you. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we have to do all of these things. But I think what my niece was pointing out was that you mentioned one thing, and it's like, sometimes you don't want it to be connected to something else. You want it just to say, no, it's just because I slept in a draft. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I have so much tension that my shoulders are up around my ears and there's no blood flow going to my brain. It's just because I slept in a draft. And sometimes we just want the easiest answer.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is that it takes years for these tensions to build up, and it takes infinitely less time to unwind them. It just requires a willingness to participate in the wisdom of the body. And that actually becomes incredibly empowering.
That is so beautiful. Yeah. Those little steps, like you said, you give your body just a little bit, and it takes it, so far. And that's really beautiful too. And I think there's so many people out there who are really yearning for this type of thing, because we're sick of the, pill response. Like, just take this pill, that's all you can do. And it's like, well, I mean, there's probably more, right?
Sometimes when you're in pain, or, like you need it, or surgeries that save lives, there's absolutely an incredibly important place for Western medicine. Absolutely. And I think that we're working on a paradigm where instead of thinking that the last 5,000 years of Chinese medicine, or this alternative arts of just taking care of yourself and your diet, they can begin to blend a little bit. And so I think the world is changing right now in a lot of ways. And I think people's public response is requiring it to change too. And that's exciting.
That is very true. It is very exciting. So, what are some of the results you've seen from practicing and teaching these types of understandings to people?
Wow. Okay. Well, and also it's difficult to say because I can't make medical claims, right?
Right. So,
So
perhaps, maybe some things.
so well, I mean, simply, okay, if I'm working hands-on with somebody else, it just amplifies my treatment response. So I can get into the nervous system and have a more direct conversation. My line is that I like to have my clients unconscious because that's where the magic really happens. When we're thinking and talking, it's not just a like, let's have a chat and work on the body, but really being able to get into where there's like a nectar that runs through the body. The nervous system is a really beautiful sensation when it's calm and streaming, and that's why I call it neural resonance therapy, because there's a resonance that runs through the nervous system when it's activated and being communicated with. And so the body has taught me, and continues to teach me every treatment and every day that I even live in my own body, how to dive in even more deeply with that. So imagine just an amplify. I'm just a better therapist because I can read the body better. It's given me a great ability to be able to read where things are coming from, where problems are. One more extreme example, a really dear friend of mine died, unfortunately, of cancer last year. And this is just kind of one more extreme example, but he had had melanoma, and I knew exactly where the melanoma was on his abdomen, even though it was in an odd place. But I had worked on him through school. I'd worked on him in shiatsu. I'd worked on him in acupuncture. We'd met in high school. And then years later, when he was in his late 40s, he got diagnosed with melanoma. And because I knew his patterning between East and West, I kind of called where the melanoma would be because it was logical from an Eastern perspective. And that's exactly where it was. And he said, that's really interesting because it isn't a weird place to have it. And then at one point I was working on him when his cancer was progressing, and I found metastasis in his calf. And the doctors hadn't found that, and he just thought he had a tight calf. And I was like, no, this is more important. And so he went to the doctor, they biopsied it, they found metastasis. Now, about 3 weeks later, his foot dropped. And so they would have found it then and then looked. But the point is that we can create the kind of awareness to be able to read the body and work in ways like that, that can give the medical community a heads up, give the people a heads up to be able to work that way. Here's a weird story in and around that, to use him as the same example. One day I was giving him a session, and I think this was before he got his melanoma. Yeah, this was before he even got cancer. And the melanoma was around, when it did show up, it was around the stomach region. And I gave him a session, and I looked at him, and it's like, it kind of gives me an ability, I guess you'll say, to look into the body. And it was like, I saw this geyser, this blood geyser coming out from his stomach. And I said, why do I see like it's like there's this blood coming out? And he said, oh, I had a bleeding hernia when I was in my 20s. And I said, that's really weird, because it looks like it's still doing that, like it's still responding, even though medically, of course, it wasn't, because they would have found that. And it was 20 years later at that point. And all of a sudden, see, so this is where it gets kind of strange, but often I will see foods or different kinds of substances that would be really good for a given condition. And so I was looking at his body, and his body started to show me a particular substance. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like, I could see it, I could feel it. It's like, I could almost taste it. It was very starch-like. It was very soothing though on the stomach as well. And then I realized, oh, this is potato juice. And I said, well, this is really weird, Dave, but apparently juicing potatoes and drinking it would be really good for your stomach.
Wow.
And he was, yeah, okay, you're weird, but that's fine. And so I looked it up after he left, because I will do this. I will sometimes get information like this from a body and then look it up. And I found out that the Chinese, for hundreds of years, were using grated potato and squeezing it to make juice to heal a myriad of conditions, one of which were bleeding stomach ulcers.
Wow.
And once I found actually a substance of something, I was working on an Australian, and here we call them cherimoyas, and there they call them custard apples, but I had never seen either. It's a particular fruit that's got a white flesh with big black seeds in it.
I've had that, yeah.
Yeah. So I had never heard of it. And I saw it in this guy's body. And I was like, it's like this fruit. It's green on the outside. I'm seeing white on the inside and black seeds. And then, but it's really soothing. It's really good for the like the stomach and spleen. It's really nourishing. He goes, oh, it's a custard apple. And I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Just
then
eat it.
and then I was in Australia, a couple of years later having a really bad day. One of those days when you're like, my life is a failure and what am I doing and what's the purpose to all of it and I'm no good. And I went down to the corner store and I found one of these custard apples. And I was like, right, see, here's a custard apple. I'm going to go home, cut it open. It's not going to be anything like what I saw. Anyway, I took it home and I cut it and it was exactly the same taste, the same everything that I saw. And it was like the gods going, see, you don't suck. You're okay. You're just having a bad day. So that's the more esoteric side of the kinds of responses. So practically what it is it just allows you to, as a therapist, amplify what you already do that much more because you're really in communication with the body and able to read better. And we're going to read based on our own skill level, right? Like I'm not teaching people how to see custard apples in people's bodies. But just to be able to communicate with a particular frequency of the nervous system. When we're working with somatic stretch, when people are working with themselves, and I teach online live twice a week, and I always post recordings there, so people can always go look at the recordings anytime.
Cool.
At geometryofhealing.com on online classes. When we're working with ourselves, it greatly it changes your body. I mean, I've just heard too many people say that. I've been teaching since 1986, because I grew up in the work. So I've been teaching for over 30 years. And I've heard so many people say the same thing. And now that I layer this fractal anatomy idea on top of it, it just helps people unlock shoulder pain, get themselves, understand why their hips are connected to their shoulders. And that if you work on your hip, you can open your shoulder. And if you work on your shoulder, you could open your hip, and why and how. And it just gives you a gliding sense through your body because you're opening areas that never get there when you're reaching for a goal or doing a bunch of stuff that really kind of creates more constriction in the body. So it gets your body really fit to be used in the first place, as my mother always said. And it just allows you to unlock tension patterns really quickly, very gently, to a remarkable degree.
It's so, I always bring everything back to myself, but I'm like, if I had this when I was young, I probably could have avoided surgery. But do you feel like when people are opening their bodies in these ways and doing these, somatic stretching or the, neural resonance or the other work like that they're also opening up, for lack of a better term, like a spiritual energy to come in more fully too?
Yeah, I mean, when we do workshops, which of course I haven't done any this year, but they're 5-day, usually 5-day immersives, and it's a very emotional experience. People they're not expecting that when they go in. They're like, I thought I was just going to work on my back, and I ended up, and people feel really elated afterwards because you've cleaned out the emotions that are actually so much a part of the holding breath and the constriction in the body. And when we open our emotions and connect it to the body and create really powerful releases like that, it is a spiritual experience. And it really reconfigures. And when I say, spiritual, we have, you and we'll understand what we mean by spiritual, but it's such a beautiful connection with ourselves. So yeah, it does do that. And then with the neural resonance, with the hands-on work, it's like you walk into an alchemy den. I put my hands on people and it goes into like a washing machine. And people kind of like, when I was saying I like my clients unconscious, they kind of like drift off into an alpha state. And it's a very powerful, deep, beautiful sleep. And I'm there awake with my hands on the body, witness to the movements going through the body as the whole nervous system kind of twitches out and releases what it needs to. And then people might just go home and just sleep really deeply, or they might end up, in tears for a couple of days. Or I've had clients call and say, I just spent the entire night throwing up last night. What happened? And I'm like, well, how do you feel now? And they're like, I feel awesome. And I'm like, well, then that's good.
You released all that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you weren't feeling awesome now, or in a day or so, or at the end of the day, then it's go see the doctor and what have you. But
we really underestimate, I think, like you said, how much the emotional is part of that. And I really, again, back to my back, I feel like I understand intuitively what, because my father also died when I was very young, and that trauma and that response to that was all just quenched down inside. And I feel like it came out through my writing arm because I started writing all day, every day about it because that was my only release. And I think it just like, I can see like the way it twisted my spine and came out and just, you know, that's all emotional. And I had this experience many, many years later. I went to my first naturopath and she did vitamin B injections, but like at acupuncture points. And I was like, I don't know, do whatever you're doing. I don't care. That's why I came to you, you know, but I started bawling, like just from nothing, from zero emotion to just bawling. And I was like so embarrassed. I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't even understand. She's like, no, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. You're just releasing it. Let it go. I was like, okay, like this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. But it's just another experience that shows like how much emotion is tied up in our physical body and our injuries and our traumas, and all of these things need to be worked out. But, you know, now we finally have a way to do it.
Yeah, and we also need to have a culture that allows emotions.
Yeah,
and
we don't have that.
Not just anger or fear, you know?
Yeah, like that response, I'm so sorry. What am I sorry for? Like, you know? Yeah. Are there, so you're training other people to do this too? Are there people sort of everywhere that are starting to do this? Or is it just sort of starting? Or like, could I find someone here?
I started teaching a long time ago, and I'm actually going to be changing the format and the way that I'm going to be teaching. And I haven't changed that on my website yet, but I'm just going to really revamp it. So yeah, I've taught over the years a 60-hour program for people who are interested in doing something like that. And now really what my focus is workshops on fractal anatomy and somatic stretch for people who just want to work with their own bodies. And then neural resonance workshops where I will only be taking like 6 people per workshop. It's really specific work. We have to really, it's not something, you know, having 20 people in a room, people aren't going to get as much kind of focus and stuff. So yeah, so it's starting in a new way, even though I started teaching it 12 years ago or more. Even I remember the first time when I was really workshopping it out of my own mind, I taught a class in Los Angeles at the school that I was teaching shiatsu in. So I don't know how many, that was a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago now or something like that. So yeah, but now they're really streamlining. I'm really wanting to focus on workshops. I have my online program on fractal anatomy and the geometry of healing, which you can find on my website. And that's also at the Resonance Science Foundation. So it's a whole program. And that's actually a prerequisite for people who want to come to my hands-on workshop, not the somatic stretch and fractal ones, because that's for anyone with a body. It's really good for people who also are therapists to go to that as well. But if they want to come to the hands-on workshop, then taking the online program is a prerequisite. And for other people, it's just brain candy.
It makes a lot of sense. It's so cool that you offer this to people. It's really nice, and I'm going to definitely do it myself. But it makes sense that you would, you know, kind of cast the seeds out. And so these things are out there for a lot of people, but now you're going to sort of like structure it and create like the masters. So, you know, you have to have prerequisites and people who have coming in with a certain base level of understanding to get to like a higher level, because that's going to help it spread even more too, I would think.
Yeah, for the therapist program, for the you know, as I was saying that I teach online every week too, that I just decided to make free and by donation when COVID hit, and to really be able to allow, so there's people can dive in at different levels. They can dive in just because they want to work with their own body. They can do the somatic stretch training program if they want to do a deep dive, doing a lot of one-on-one coaching with me and working through a whole online program. And then they can come to workshops if they want to get away and do like a really good 5-day immersive somewhere beautiful. And then the therapists can actually go in and that's really fun to workshop with a bunch of different people who are already either beginners or really advanced, and we can have them all in the same room because of the nature of the work. And it's really exciting how we all learn and share.
It's so cool. So let's get into the really cool stuff. There's this video I think that anybody could go watch, and I'll just throw it up on the screen really quick so people can see it, even though you won't be able to see it right now, but just so people know. And I'll put the link out here. It's at geometryofhealing.com, and it's this video that's just at the bottom of the page, and it's really neat for me, at least, because it and I don't know how much I can play without getting copyright, but I'll just play a few seconds so people get an idea.
Which video is that?
It's oops, I have it on double speed. It's called Fractal Anatomy, Merkaba, and Human Form.
Oh, that's my music, so there's no copyright
Oh,
issue.
cool. Well, I love I just played a few seconds of it. I think I just put it in the chat. Yeah, I did. So people can go watch it. And I love that it's just very conceptual and you can really understand a lot of this from just that video. But I want to ask you too what your ideas are about how this fractal anatomy and geometry has informed you about the like what it is to be human. Like what are we? What is it? What are we doing here?
Nice small question.
Yeah.
First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link. I don't know. I'll put it to everyone, I guess. I don't know if people are on there, but it's
Yeah.
a talk that I just did, like a TED style talk for 20 minutes.
Cool.
Just came out on the Resonance Science Foundation. And so that link that I just put up is really the best way to describe all of this in 20 minutes. I put 25 years of work into 20 minutes, and it was at the 2019 Resonance Conference. And 60 people submitted to give a talk and 6 were chosen, and I was one of the 6. So I was really honored. And because of COVID and a bunch of details, they weren't actually released. This talk was just released this last weekend.
Wow.
So I definitely encourage people to go check that out, because that, I would say, is the best example of anything I've done so far as a talk goes, to really explain with pictures and all the rest of it.
Well, that's a huge accomplishment. You know, the art of the Pressies is understated, and you know, Richard Feynman, I think it was, a famous physicist, said if you can't explain your work, you know, briefly to like a person who has no idea what you're talking about, then you don't understand your work. So I'd say you've reached master level if you can do that.
Hopefully, if other people understand it too, then maybe I will have, cracked the code a bit.
Yeah. Well, that, like I said, that video even that I watched was just, it's not like a lot of explanation or a lot of facts or talking points. It's all visualization, but I'm like, like I get it, you know, I don't get it obviously, but just, you know,
well, no, and that's the point, is just to let the vision come in, that, you know, the different things. There is one video out there that's a friend's song. So I hope I didn't just say that it was my song if it was her video. But anyway, it's fine, because she's awesome. So what was your question? How does this
how does it help you understand what it is to be human? Like, what are we and what we're doing here? If you want to go there.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the best way to go there. As a physical human, it allows me to recognize that I have an incredible amount of power to work with my own health and my own mind and my own advancement. And when I've been working this way, it has opened and accelerated both my creativity and my intuition to such great degrees that my life is really happy on that level. You know, it really, I remember hearing this thing that I repeat a lot. If you want to know what the life of a creative is like, imagine 562 browsers open all the time. It's like, oh, this is what we're gonna do. And it kind of, you know, and it makes my dream life deeper. It's, you know, like we don't know why we're here, and we don't know. And this is where we're going now from the physical into the more numinous. But, you know, we don't know why we're here. We don't know how long we're going to be here for. We don't know where we're going when we leave. And we don't know if it's going to hurt when it does. And so, you know, so we really are always kind of looking for, like, where can we touch? We're the drop looking for the ocean all the time. And so the more I work with the wisdom of my own body, the more that I create avenues in order to communicate with it, the richer my life becomes, the more I grow as a person with I hate using the word integrity because I think it's an overused word, but a person with, you know, I grew up well, you know, I'm growing up better than certainly where I was at the time. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't going to maybe turn out all right or whatever. But again, just like working on a body, it's accelerated a response. And, so I have a little bit more gentleness with myself with the parts that aren't perfect yet, the parts that I do, you know, it's appreciating a flow. It's actually become my website is called Temple Body. You know, our body is a temple, and it's kind of like my church. That's what one thing that I was reflecting on in this world, watching some of the stuff that's been out there this year, and impossible to determine what is true and what is not true anymore is an impossible thing to determine. You can't even watch a video and know what's true or not true because you don't know if it's been doctored or not. Like we're living in a remarkable time where, particularly in the last year, there's so much information and none of it can be verified, it seems. And I finished watching a video that a friend of mine did, and I looked at it and thought, like, okay, I don't even know what to believe anymore at all. And so I asked myself the question, so is there anything that you can truly believe in? And I thought about it, and I thought the only thing that I could really say I believe in is my work, because my body showed me. And years ago, one of my dearest friends and I were at a meditation retreat when we were 25 in Thailand. And I remember the nuns talking about bright faith and blind faith. And they said, blind faith is when you just believe something because someone has told you. But bright faith is when it really becomes a truth for you. You have an experience from the inside out. And so anything that we're telling you, don't believe any of it, and try it on. And if it works for you, then it's your truth, but don't believe anything until you've had that experience. And that's one thing that's always stayed with me since I was 25. And I just feel like the body has shown me, I don't even have to say, it's not like there's a lot of theory in my work. Like if you go through the Geometry of Healing program online, there's a lot involved there. And some people really like the theory and some people don't, but I've made it accessible in different kinds of ways. And I don't even have to be right, quote unquote, about everything. It's a really valuable contribution to the conversation on the whole of how we unify Eastern and Western thought and our own health and different things. But it does give me a sense of feeling like what I can trust is what my body has taught me, what my subconscious world has taught me, what it has informed my conscious mind as I wake up in these dimensions for yet again another day, wondering why it's even happening.
I love it. It's like the essence of Gnosticism, if you can take off all the trappings of like the systems and the church of it or whatever, but the idea that you know something because you experienced it and that there's no other real type of knowing that matters or that
absolutely.
Or that, like you said, all the rest can be illusion at various different levels. So that's beautiful. And it's interesting because I think a lot of the spiritual and especially like some of the new age and the sort of more shallow maybe dives into some of these various different traditions, take the spiritual experience and the like desire to become a spiritual being to this extreme where we like abandon the body, or the body is like bad, or the body is like the, I don't know, like the sin or something.
Gnosticism is based in that too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Has a big component of that. So there's this somewhere in our subconscious, our psyche, our culture, whatever, is telling us the physical isn't very good. We want to transcend that and like get away from it. But I love what you're describing because I feel like it's a lot more honest and real that actually our physical is, like you said, it's the temple. It's like can teach us all of these things, and it's beautiful. Why would we want to hate on it?
Yeah. And I've definitely, I think when we have peak experiences too, they're in the body and suddenly the entire space becomes something very different. And it's just this entire, I think that's why people do a lot of plant medicine, so they can like reach that space. But the point is that we naturally can do that, and those kinds of experiences really allow us to see the beauty of the physical form too.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one thing with Gnosticism. I'm a little bit like, oh, it's kind of,
unfortunate
filthy body that you just can't wait to get out of it. Like that just doesn't seem inspiring. But I haven't really dove into Gnosticism enough to know if that's the be all and end all of their thought.
I liked Jung's take on it because he is also not very down with that part. He's like, you had to go through this part. This is very necessary and beautiful and perfect for right here, right now. And maybe you do something else some other time, but why spend your time here in this body wishing you weren't? You're here. Something, I'm sure I just butchered that, but there's something like that in there.
No, not at all though. But I think it's a really important thing because I feel that there are things in the body too, emotions that are trapped in the body that teach us that, or we've been taught to, that we maybe hold on to, about feeling, not worthy, not good enough, dirty, filthy. That there's something in the psyche that definitely represents that. Yeah. And to me, part of the spiritual path is actually overcoming that or working with it in a more of a participatory thing. That's why I like meditation, because going into meditation, there's a space where I can go in with my mind, like we go into the stretch, which is that there's a place that's easy to move. And then you start to meet resistance, and we're retraining the brain to actually find where the resistance starts and recognize it, because usually we don't, because we think the stretch is further out, or we're thinking for reaching for our toes. But there's this little space here, and it's what I call the neural zone, and it's where you can really all of a sudden integrate and shift and change. So you're just looking for like where sensation begins, and then you relax your entire body. And that's where the elongation happens and draws blood and nutrients in, and that's why it changes the physical body so much. But in meditation, I'm playing with this more and more, of being able to go in where my mind is comfortable, like a little bit of a ball that can feel its parameters. And then I'm really, there's the edge of something that doesn't really feel clear and clean yet. And then even just thinking about it, like the breath just immediately releases, because the breath is just like frozen emotion. And when you hit that neural zone, the breath naturally releases. And then suddenly there's a little bit more space, or a shaking off. And in that way, it's almost like we can cleanse our emotions of these negativities we hold that we don't even recognize that really are about how we're not good enough. And that leads us, I think, to not feel comfortable in our own temple space.
Yeah. And you have to go in and clean that up.
Yeah.
Because how, when you are feeling that way, or any sort of way where you've sort of denied yourself or ignored yourself, like that's where, problems occur. And, we have all sorts of names for that. And I think, anyways, I won't get into all of that, but just that this is where our trauma is. You could relate it to psychology. You can find it in physical health. You can find it at sort of every level of our being. And it's all the same sort of process, I think, of like becoming aware and being present with it, no matter what it is. Might hurt a little, might be scary, right? Might make you cry for a long time on someone's table who you've never met before and apologize to them profusely. But like that's what you have to do to reintegrate all of those levels of your being.
Very well put. Yeah.
What a beautiful thing. Well, it makes me want to take classes and come, get these treatments done and do all this stuff. And I know people out in the audience are probably feeling the same. And I, for myself, have spent my whole life just trying to be in my body, and I finally feel like I am now, in the most recent stage of my life. And I can't imagine how beneficial this is for most people, maybe especially in the Western world. Do you feel like in other areas of the world that it's a little bit more understood or something?
Well, I mean, certainly in Asia, there's a lot more in, Qigong and different things of that nature. Being in India, people, there's a lot of awareness around the kinds of, Panchakarma that they do, and different kinds of things. So yeah, they blend Eastern and Western ideas more. And then there's still, there's even persecution though still happening with people who are working that way over in the East. So, yeah. I don't know.
Every area probably has a bit more to go before we really get it.
Yeah.
Do you we really didn't even hardly touch on the actual geometries themselves, and in the video it's easy to see, I saw the tree of life, and I saw I think the flower of life, and various things like the double helix and the double torus and all of this stuff. Do you want to say something about all the different geometries and how they relate to the universe? Or I don't know how well we could encapsulate that.
I'm going to give people a couple of ideas. One is that in the video that you sent out, and in the video link that I sent out of my talk that just came out, those are great things that are going to give people a much better idea than anything I could say right now, but I'm still going to say some stuff. And that also, when you go to the geometryofhealing.com site, if you scroll down a bit and it says, look at the geometry and fractal anatomy program here, there's a lot of little videos there that explain a lot about what's in the program. So even if you don't get the program, you'll get a really good idea of what you're talking about. There's one video in particular where I start off talking, but then by the end of it, it's just going into one geometry after another and talking about how we can connect it. We're going to be connecting it to our biology. But I guess what I would say is that once you have one geometry, you have all geometries. So one thing I find really funny in the in the discussion zones in the geometry world is sometimes people are all about the pentagon, they're all about the 5, and other people are all about the 6. And the 5s argue with the 6s, and the 6s argue with the 5s about which one's right. And like, it's not everywhere, but it's still kind of apparent enough. And I think it's really hilarious because the whole point of geometry, and it is interesting because the 5 and the 6 do have some weird bump to like actually connect.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the Fibonacci sequence that never quite makes a whole circle. It misses to go down. Or in music, when you go through that note, you got to, between this note and that note, what is it? The B and the C or whatever it is, like that's why you can have so many different musical scales. Like Bach came up with his own way of determining not the scale, but what's it called, because it's just sound, right? But somewhere along the space of sound there's this glitch that happens. Or the same thing with the calendar of the year, right? That's what they had to make so many different calendars, because it wasn't just this pat thing. Like that's why we have leap year, because we don't know what to do with that thing. So we just kind of like fix it by doing that. So there's this, so the 5 and 6 kind of do that too. It's an interesting thing. I think they're actually a pathway into a more dimensional space. I have a feeling. Anyway, I digress. So geometry, when you have one geometry, you have all of them. And the reason that it's funny to argue about whether it's a 5 or a 6 is that the very point of geometry is that all things are connected. So it can't ever be one thing or the other. So we're constantly expressing our linear form of being taught how to think all the time. So that being said, the geometry, the best line, I spent about an hour or more once a long time ago trying to write out a thought that I had. And I used so many words and so many paragraphs, and I got so frustrated. And I finally just put my fingers down and looked up and said, just write me. And I just went boom, 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 boom. And then I sat back to read it, and I thought, And then I realized, oh my God, that's like the best sentence ever. And so I use it all the time. And it's that geometry is not the source of energy, but it's an agent for the human mind to witness the invisible in action. Geometry is not the source of energy. It's an agent for the human mind to witness the invisible in action. So if you could see all of the cosmic rays in the room, the internet rays, the gamma rays, all the different rays that we have tracked so far in the electromagnetic spectrum, or that we use because we're communicating right now from Colorado to California and across the globe. If we could actually see in the room what that looked like, what do you think it would look like? It's invisible, but it's there. And so is it going to be circles? Well, yeah, it's going to be circular on one hand. It's going to be linear on another. Is it particle or is it wave? We start getting into, so geometry is kind of a way to be able to grab onto a light beam and hold it for a second to just get an idea of what it is. So the shape that revealed itself to me in the body was a very practical sensory exploration for me. And when I say practical, I also mean it took 12 or 15 years, but it was practical from the point of view that everything that I was feeling, I discovered a shape, or I uncovered a shape in the body before I had put any theory behind it, really. Like it was just, and I can show it to you.
Yay.
So there's a 2D version of it that I try to show in 3D on the videos that I do.
Yeah.
But this is the shape. So upper, middle, and lower is one of the easiest ways fractally to understand. Upper, middle, lower can be upper, middle, lower down your arm. Interestingly, it makes a 2-sided triangle, Star of David, Seal of Solomon out of it. And unfortunately, the video doesn't show as well when you do this online, but when you spin it,
wow,
it makes some really remarkable geometries. Now imagine my amazement when I finally started to, because I was like, I can see, because it was planes of energy running through the body and intersection points being made. And half of this, when you look at it, is Kabbalic in nature. But because, and like, I didn't know anything about the Kabbalah at the time. So it started going off on this esoteric bent that was not my intention. And then because it was so equally right one way, it was equally right the other. So it's basically two Kabbalic structures in 3D put together.
Wow.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like I didn't know Kabbalic stuff. So I started with like plasticine. Apparently that's not a word in America, I found out.
I thought I knew what that was. Isn't it like
No,
moldable,
yeah,
sort of like clay almost?
thank you. Somebody the other day was like, no, we'd call it like modeling clay or something. I'm like, really? Anyway, so modeling clay or whatever, like little balls and toothpicks, and that would fall apart. And then I would go to like kids stores and get little geometry kits or something, but they were like magnetic and they would fall apart. And then a beautiful student of mine created one. I don't think I can pull it down off. It's been hanging over my desk for years now. Awesome. She did stained glass. And so she did the first half, putting it together. I wonder if I could, I don't think I can pull that down, unfortunately. And so it wasn't until I actually went to somebody who makes geometric pieces, and I had him do the first half of the triangle, like just the triangle in shape. And then I had him put the two of them together. And imagine my amazement. I could finally hold in my hand, like holding onto a light beam, what I'd been feeling and working in the body for years and years and years. And then to hold it up and then spin it and go, oh my God, it does that too. So it was just all these different things that I've been learning about. And the gold and mean is throughout this whole thing.
Wow.
So none of that meant anything to me, gold and mean or geometry or any of that. And I remember the day that I realized it was geometry that I was looking at, and the kind of the 3D-ness of it. And I was just stunned. And part of me was amazed, and part of me was so upset, because I was like, I mean, there's nothing worse that I suck at than anything mathematical. Like how this is, I just hit the end of the road. There's just no way. You cannot pass go, do not pass go. Like there was no way that I was going to be able to understand it. It just wasn't my domain. And I was a bit shocked and dismayed. I was like, well, how am I supposed to learn about geometry now? Like, that's absurd. And then I started meeting some of my closest friends and colleagues in the field. They just showed up. Some guy was here doing a geometry thing. And so I went to go see him, and he's become one of my closest friends, Jonathan Quinton, who, by the way, has a fantastic program out also on the Resonance Science Foundation called Universal Order, for people who want to really start working with geometry and understanding how to draw it and let your mind go through that kind of time warp with it. His work is beautiful. His art is beautiful. And Marshall Lefferts of the Resonance Science Foundation. Ultimately, I found Nassim Haramein's work first. He is a physicist who is working on the unified field theory in physics, which is basically trying to understand Einstein's relativity theory and the quantum world. So the relativity theory explains how all planets and big things move, and the quantum world explains how all the little tiny bits move, and they have to be connected, or else, we wouldn't even have atoms that turn into fibers, that turn into yarn, that turn into our clothes. Like, they have to be connected. So he's working on that. And what I call, you'll see in the talk that I put the link out on, is the unified field in medicine, where we're really weaving Western and Eastern sciences. Now, people who know a lot about physics, some think that Nassim is like God, and other physicists think he's, full of it and a charlatan, and no, it's not true, but nobody's proved him incorrect yet. There's a lot of physicists who are trying to find, it's the holy grail right now, is trying to find the unified field in science, in physics. But for me, the reason that I really respect and appreciate and feel a connection to Nassim's work is because it was his work that I watched 8 hours of video way back in the day when they first came out.
Black hole?
No, it was, that's a good one too. That one's about an hour long. This one's called Crossing the Event Horizon, Rise to the Equation. And it's an old one, 8 hours long. And at the end of it, he starts putting the Kabbalic nature in the midst of the isotropic vector matrix. And I stopped the video and my jaw hit the ground.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking when you were showing me that. I was like, this is what Nassim Haramein did too, but in a different application.
Yeah, his is the isotropic vector matrix, the IVM.
Wow.
And Yeah. So he, when I saw that, I realized, like, oh my God, what physicists are seeing in the cosmos is what I'm seeing in the body. Like, finally. So it was really important that it was an isolating experience, because I came up with all of this with no knowledge of geometry, no knowledge of anything that was going on in physics, didn't know any of the people I know today. And I was completely alone with my thoughts for 15 or so maddening years. And then at the point that I saw Nassim pull geometry out of the cosmos, suddenly I felt sane. I gave him one of these once when I first met him. And I said, he was giving a talk, and I actually asked if I could give a talk for 10 minutes first. It was a small gathering. And at the end of the 10 minutes, I gave him this piece, and I said, I just want to give this to you because thanks to you, what did I say? Something like, I don't feel insane anymore. I got my sanity back. And he laughed, and I said, no, I'm serious.
Literally. Yeah.
I'm actually serious. So, yeah, I don't know where we're going with that after that.
What a touching moment that must have been. I'm like almost like crying just like listening to it, and I have no connection to it except this. Yeah, well, that, can people get that? I kind of want one. Do you sell them?
I do sell them on my website, and they're handmade. So sometimes I have a few still now, because I had some made a little while ago. But they're, I also have a necklace that I have those made.
Cool.
And the first batch, actually, because they have crystals inside of them,
wow.
Nassim actually had charged in his free energy device, which was really a really powerful thing.
Wow.
And there's a whole story behind those ones. But anyway, so I sell the necklaces and I sell these, and they're all handmade. So sometimes they take a while to get to people because they're all made by artisans, and they have their own process. And then I have all the bits and pieces made that go with it, and put them together myself and send them out. So,
well, I'm gonna get one of those too. Well, this has been amazing and awesome, and I know we've barely scratched the surface, but and I know you just mentioned your site, and we've put some links out, but let's tell people again how they can connect with you and what sites you'd like them to go to, and I'll put it in the chat too, so people can get to those, and anything that you might have coming up, or just things you want people to know about.
Thanks. So geometryofhealing.com is my main website. On there, you can go to the link that says online classes. And there you can scroll down and either sign up to come to a live class. I teach every Wednesday and Saturday at 9:30 to 10:30 Pacific time. I'll soon be moving over more to Mountain Time, I think it's called. I don't know. I'm sure. Less you know, the more there is to discover. Yeah. So that's just an hour Wednesdays and Fridays. But if you scroll down further, you can find the recordings, because every time I teach, like I'm teaching in the morning, I load up the recording and take down one of the older ones. So people can come and stretch and just feel good and improve your immune system, because there hasn't been a lot of mention of that made this year. And that's pivotal. And so just come and feel better. It's really gentle. You don't have to be flexible to do it. And you can be very flexible. I'm extremely flexible. And I'm working on very, very little movement. And as people always say, how can I move so little and achieve so much? So there's that. My Geometry of Healing program and Fractal Anatomy, you can scroll down again on that first page, and very soon you'll see a little green bar that says to learn about that program. That gives you a lot of information about not only the program, but as I said, certain clips in there. And definitely watching the 20-minute YouTube would explain it. And on my website too, there's ways in April. I'm kind of booked through till April, but there's places where people can call and chat with me for 20 minutes about specific things, in order to find out if there's anything that I can help them with, or that can be offered. I do one-on-ones with people globally on Zoom. I also do body readings globally. So there's a lot of information there that kind of talks about the different sorts of services that I offer, and how I can help people just continue the path of self-discovery and self-empowerment. I think it's been kind of this empowering year in certain ways, in and around that. And I think it's really important to recognize that these external protocols are important. And first and foremost, the strength of your own immune system and what you can do for you can be really helpful. And that's also been very hard this year, because people have been depressed, and and been in really challenging situations. So it's really important to have support in that journey and in that path. And any way that I can do that is what I am here to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks for being one of the few healers who recognizes our innate ability to heal and tries to support us in that, because I think a lot of people need to hear that message right now, and it's very cool that you're that available as well. And I maybe this is a hard question to answer, or maybe you've thought about it a lot and it's easy for you to answer, I don't know, but where do you see, what is the best possible future you can imagine going from where we are at now into the future?
I think that I see a lot of change happening. We're having to think creatively and laterally in ways we haven't before. And this has been a really powerful challenge to get us to think differently. I mean, me even teaching online, I never did that until COVID. And now I have a whole way to offer free stuff for people who can't come to class. A different way to earn income. Like we've had to think creatively, and working with ourselves does allow us to tap into that creativity. So a couple of things I want to say about that. One is that, for instance, like I'm not feeling so good about, like, proud of myself, like, oh, I do this thing and I offer people and I help people. What I did was I alchemized some anger. And that's what I feel good about it, because there's been a lot to be frustrated in one form or another, no matter how you're feeling about anything this year. And I was really angry. I was really angry that we weren't hearing anything from our medical authorities about, we know that we don't know what we're dealing with. Please keep in mind, this is a really important and powerful time for you to work with your own health. We want to encourage you. We'll maybe even go so far as to put some money into programs for you to get therapy, or encourage you to get exercise, or, boost your immune. Here's some blah, 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 something like that. I just felt like there was just nothing said about it. And then suddenly alternative, like, what's alternative about taking care of yourself? And what's alternative about boosting your immune system? And what's alternative about choosing to have a better diet than the standard American diet? Like, I don't know. It just really made me so angry. And I just realized I was going to be part of the problem if I was just, so I had to ask myself, all right, smarty pants, what can you do? And I just thought, oh, well, I have this good thing, I'll just give it away. Meanwhile, my entire industry, like all of my hands-on work, this was before my program came out, my hands-on work, my classes, everything stopped overnight. I had no income, but I just decided I'm just going to give it away, because that's the only way that I can alchemize how frustrated I am right now in any kind of way. And so I think that that's a really important process, that when we're looking at, like, the future, being able to catch ourselves in moments of, all right, this is frustrating, but therefore it's asking me to think differently. What can I do to make the world a better place? What can I do? And I think so many people are thinking that way as well. Who can I help right now? Is there a food place that I can go to and help support feeding the homeless? Is there something, like, we have to just start thinking outside of, like, I'm so annoyed that I don't have my 9-to-5 job right now, and people, or if people who are just really down and need help, are we helping enough people? Are we, and younger people are really incredible for how like with these 12-year-olds who are figuring out how to clean the oceans up or whatever. Unbelievable what's happening. And so I think that the perfect best world that we're walking into is one where we're alchemizing our anger into something constructive. Gandhi proved that revolutions can happen without bloodshed, even though he was the one who was killed at the end, but it didn't take out everybody. And I think it's really important that we grow as a species. When we see what we've done to this planet, we have proven ourselves to be a highly immature species. And so there's a lot to do in that. And I think there's a lot of people who care about that. And when we talk about tipping, that you only need a certain amount of percentage in order to tip the whatever, that to me is herd immunity, is actually getting things up to a point where you can really, or when they say when you meditate, it only takes one, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said it takes one person in the household to meditate to change the whole household. So I think we live in Hogwarts schools. I think we live in really powerful temple spaces, and we were never taught how to use them. And we are our own living laboratories. And I think that the deepest temple can be accessed anytime and any place by any of us. And we just need to make a choice to follow that thread and keep clearing what isn't harmonious out of us, trying to catch ourselves as much as possible when we're in the midst of a challenging moment, and try to just pour out as much love and care as we can, because we created the world that we're living in. And so we can create a different world that's really worth living in. And I think if COVID hadn't happened this year, we were like a race car at high speed for a concrete wall. And I think that if all the fear that's been generated this year serves any particular purpose, it's to have made everyone really pull back for a moment so that we can renegotiate and reevaluate the GPS system of where we're heading. So I see a lot of positivity in what we're doing.
What a beautiful vision. It really reminds me of on a personal level, we can all experience this too, right? Where we're, experiencing something so dark and so difficult, and maybe we just want to give up. And it's like, I could never do this. I can't get through this. This is the worst. And then you get to a point where you're like, well, I'd have to do it or die. So I guess I'll try, and then you have to take some responsibility and start parsing through it all. And then you find out oh, I actually could do it. And it's a lot better on the other side than it ever was before. So, maybe we're experiencing that collectively. And that was a beautiful monologue you just gave us on the ideas that we can aim for and the vision that we can take into creating our future. But I always ask people if they have any final thoughts to share anyways, even when they just shared something so cool.
Yeah, no, I think that you spoke so eloquently about that moment where things are really, really challenging. And what I know always works, and what I know is sometimes the hardest for me to remember in a challenging moment, what always works is going into your body and breathing. And there is, I don't know if I can create some sort of offer here on the cuff, but there's one program that I created that I really like a lot. It's called the 5-Minute Promise. And it's just a series of little short 5-minute things for people to actually get into their body. Because if you sit for 5 minutes and breathe, you'll end up staying there longer and doing more. But even if you just did 5 minutes, it will calm you down. So maybe I can just offer some sort of discount of 20% or something to anybody from your show who emails me through my website and asks me specifically for that product, and I'll give it to them at 20% off.
Awesome. For 20% off
anytime this year.
Ooh.
It's only March.
All year for the 5 minutes.
Because I just think it's really important. The final thought is our bodies have everything in it that we need, and we are the ones getting everything in the way of our bodies actually functioning. Our bodies are doing their best to keep us actually thriving and out of pain for as long as possible. It's remarkable what the body is doing. And so I just really encourage people to adapt some sort of a daily practice, prayer for people who are religious or have, or spiritual or what have you, and just prayer, meditation, breathing, just getting into your body. If you're not into prayer and meditation, just, get into your body and start to stretch and breathe. And information comes up, information leaves you don't need. And it just really helps calm our nervous system. Imagine if the entire world were like the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
It would look really different right now, right? So we all have this activism and this daily ability to be able to work with ourselves. And we literally create a resonance that affects other people, not just us. So to me, that's the most important practice. And it's one that I do this so that I remember, not, I'm in this not because this is so great at what I do, but because I need it for myself. I need to. My whole job is about chilling everybody else out and chilling myself out. And those who know me know I can get pretty fiery. So I have to always watch that edge. Just keep going back to the mat. And that's what yoga is all about too. So there's an explosion of people who are really focused on things like that. And to me, it's a saving grace. So I would encourage anyone to find one that works for you and breathe with it.
Beautiful. Fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. And this has been your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom according to the wisdom-filled frequency and matter master, Meredith Sands Keator. Meredith, thank you so much for everything you've brought us tonight and for being who you are.
Thank you, Lindsay. You too. Much love. I appreciate it.
Well, happenstance has brought us quite far when we look around. There's no real reason we should still exist, given all the insanity of colliding galaxies, to the errant atoms smashed at a laboratory with no real idea of what could happen in response, to the possible wild virus or atomic bomb accidentally exploding across the globe, if any of those things even exist. And especially because we know very little of our environment, in the end, how have we even made it this far? It's excellent luck, divine providence, sheer tyranny of the collective will of all humanity, or some other combination of the elements of fate. But should we really hope to always be this lucky? It's long past time those of us with eyes to see and ears to hear took all the responsibility inherent in our place here as stewards of bodies and the earth, with full understanding of how those roles are intricately intertwined, and did everything we could in order to create the highest vision of the best version of ourselves possible. Are you ready? Let's rock this world. And until we shake away everything that no longer serves us, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
I heard the Freemasons called you.
Man, they at it again. And I'm out to tell the truth once more.
That's right.
It's on the cracking, unknown in the house. APOGZ,
That's right.
hitting
Let
the
them
stereo
know.
near you.
Truth is the best
You know,
thing.
and it's
all
on.
day.
Yo, I once thought that I wanted to get Denver on track, but to
track.
something more bigger than that. Something lurking, waiting to blow this state right off the map. A hidden agenda related to September. Doves carved up on the wall next to the highway. Up in the concrete, while rolling home next to where I stay. With state's destruction, Lockheed Martin malfunction. While NORAD's in the mountain anticipating our next move. My heart's jumping and I'm like, fuck waiting. While crooked taxes are burning a hole in my pocket. With $1 bill in the pyramid that's watching. Instead of having a capstone on top of it, they have an eye with a fast surprise while you're flossing it. Greedy niggas jocking it, politics plotting it. So who you vote for really doesn't mean shit. So save your energy from being drained by the enemy. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, envisioning dreams of them chasing me. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, envisioning dreams of them chasing me. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, secret agencies with a plan to dominate all of man. Check the records of DIA, strange murals and paintings similar to the ones next to the highway. With pyramids and flames underneath them looking like they're about to fly away. I can't be tripping, but it sounds like I'm on acid. Most people slipping, taken below DIA, held captive in the near future, where they won't hesitate to reinstate new laws for a bigger cause. I'm talking about established civilian concentration camps, introducing the military's labor programs. Expand your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you witness the belittlement of your people. Expand your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you witness the belittlement of your people.
Feds ain't stretching the truth, the script that he's spitting is true. Pay attention to what's going on or it might happen to you. When it's happening to you, cellular communication monitor, behavior studied and controlled through chemicals bombing nerves. This word of Jesus ain't got anything to do with the religious cynic, where experiments cage and lace in terms of accepting limits. Things they can't explain to the sky when I'm in the Rockies. Chakra systems limited due to the voltage overhead pop. Mind control victims, slap clips and machine guns for recess. FCC will help us speak less, manipulate us through weak feel right nonfiction with the CIA trying to kill me filthy. Talking about the underground facility at DIA, no one feel that place laced with hints. Notice whenever I return home, like some references in a new world Masonic capstone. Croy and Area 51 workers the building, I don't mean to rant. In the face of an emergency, it doubles as a FEMA camp. Carbon reaction solution trickery repeated through history. NORAD's listening in using technology, tracking where you piss. I'm not paranoid or just facing the fact. Better watch what you say, it's another day under the Patriot Act.
Extend your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you intercept a little bit of your people. Extend your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you intercept a little bit of your people.
The idea is to bring people to the point where they are helpless, passive, and unable to assert their own creative power to form anything else. Success for people like this is measured in terms of money, which they then translate into power. Corruption and violations of the Constitution. secret societies, the push for one world government. I'd like to get corruption and violations of the Constitution. The idea is to bring people to the point where they are helpless, passive, and unable to assert their own creative power to form anything else.